Future President Herbert Hoover and his new bride Lou spent the beginning of their marriage in China and got caught up in the Boxer Rebellion. While there, they also learned Mandarin, a skill they would use while in the White House to avoid eavesdroppers. I'm Bob Summers, and I hope I get this right. Je suis aigu, guan yu dong tong du gu shi. After working for a mining company in Western Australia, 24-year-old Herbert Hoover returned to California to marry his Stanford University sweetheart, Lou Henry. On the day after their February 10, 1899 wedding, the Hoovers left on their honeymoon cruise to China, where Hoover was to start a new job as a mining consultant to the Chinese emperor and chief engineer with the London-based global mining firm Buick Moring & Company. Buick Moring owned an interest in a multinational corporation, the Chinese Engineering and Mining Company, and Hoover was to oversee the establishment of a new coal mining operation. The Hoovers arrived in China in March 1899. Lou immediately searched for a teacher who could teach her the Chinese language. She found Chuan Yitong and learned of his exceptional reputation as a tutor. Chuan was described as speaking the beautiful Peking dialect, Mandarin, without a flaw, and to hear him speak was like listening to delightful music. Chuan taught many of the missionaries and men in government positions. They owed their proficiency and their love of the Chinese language to him. Lou, whose Chinese name was Lu, studied with Chuan every day, while according to Herbert, Chinese name Hua, I never absorbed more than 100 words. He was not as proficient as Lou, who learned over 60,000 words. A little over a year after the Hoovers arrived in China, a nationalist insurrection erupted against the increasing influence of the various colonial powers who were attempting to carve out spheres of influence in China. The Society of Righteous Harmonious Fists, known to foreigners as the Boxers, believed they possessed supernatural powers that protected them from harm. Their plan was to destroy all foreigners and foreign industries in China. They were also out to exterminate any Chinese who associated with foreigners or Christianity. In June 1900, the Boxers, reinforced by thousands of renegade Chinese soldiers, laid siege to the city of Tianjin, trapping the 800 Westerners residing there, including the Hoovers. Herbert led the building of barricades around the residential section of the city, organized the food supplies, and saw to the operation of the water purification plant, while Lou volunteered in the hospital. During the ensuing month-long siege, their home and garden suffered direct hits from modern field guns and mortar fire. An allied force from 8 nations, including the United States, responded to put down the Boxer Rebellion. On July 14th, after a day of hard fighting, Tianjin was liberated. The 8-nation alliance suffered 1,300 dead and wounded. During the battle, Hoover had guided U.S. Marines around the city using his knowledge of the local terrain. With the battle won, the Hoovers were able to leave for Buick Moring & Company headquarters in London in early August. On August 8, 1900, Lou wrote to her friend Evelyn White, "You missed one of the opportunities of your life by not coming to China in the summer of 1900. So many, many, many times I thought of you and that you should have been here at the most interesting siege and bombardment of the age." As interesting as the siege may have been, the strategic value of Tianjin was inconsequential. Had the settlement been overrun, it would have made little difference to the military success or failure of the Boxer Rebellion. Now in London, Herbert was offered a junior partnership in Buick Moring & Company based on his work in China. From this opportunity, he built his personal fortune, which reached $4 million in 1914, or almost $130 million today. In addition, he acquired his extraordinary skills as an administrator and financial manager. When World War I broke out in 1914, Hoover was still in London. He was asked to use his logistical skills, along with his experience of being under siege in Tianjin, to help provide food for the civilians of Belgium trapped behind the Western Front. This relief work in Europe turned out to be the end of his engineering career and the beginning of his work in the public sector. Hoover's public work eventually led him to the presidency in 1929, but that didn't mean he was comfortable with the attention. Herbert and Lou both wanted to maintain their privacy. One example of that was that the Hoovers did not want to see the White House staff while they were walking around the mansion. So the staff developed the pattern of hiding when they heard their footsteps. They would sometimes ring a bell to alert the others. Twice for Herbert, and 3 times for Lou. Then the staff would pile into closets or hide behind bushes so they could not be seen. But the sense of privacy was not real. Another way the Hoovers tried to maintain their privacy from staff and the press was to speak to each other in Mandarin. As Herbert remarked on his Mandarin usage after he left China, "All our life afterwards, Lou kept that 100 words in use between us by speaking Chinese to me in sotto voce occasions." In reality, it was Lou who was the polyglot powerhouse in the Hoover household, speaking 6 languages in addition to English: Latin, German, French, Italian, Spanish, and of course Mandarin. Lou had studied Latin while at Stanford. She was so proficient that she collaborated with Herbert in translating Georgius Agricola's 1556 Encyclopedia of Mining and Metallurgy, De Rea Metallica, or On the Nature of Metals. The book had previously been considered unusable due to the difficulty of translating its technical language, some of which had been invented by Agricola. Lou was responsible for the translation from the Latin, sometimes using her knowledge of German, French, and Italian to translate the words several times over and place the phrases in context. Meanwhile, Herbert applied his knowledge of the subject matter and carried out physical experiments based on what they discerned from the text. Herbert would also use his expertise to name objects that the author had only described because there were no Latin terms for them. After its translation, a process that took 5 years and all of the Hoovers' spare time, the Hoovers published it at their own expense and donated copies to students and mining experts. The Hoovers' translation is still considered definitive and has been the model for later translations of De Rea Metallica into other modern languages. In recognition of their work, they received the Gold Medal of the Mining and Metallurgical Society of America in 1914. Thanks for watching.